His parents didn't say a word. They just quietly raised his rent to help fund his golden boy little brother and his brother's family. So he cut off contact. Want to know what could push someone to completely cut ties with their own parents? Stick with us. This story is full of tension and emotion. Ryan Park isn't the kind of guy who stands out. He doesn't like drama, doesn't talk much about himself, and definitely doesn't live to please others. He's 34, a software engineer at a mid-sized tech company just north of Austin, Texas. Every morning at exactly 7:15, Ryan leaves his rented house, drives his old silver sedan to the office, sits down quietly at his desk, works efficiently, eats lunch alone, and leaves at 5 p.m. Not early, not late. The house he rented sat in an older neighborhood, less than a 15-minute drive from work. It used to belong to his grandparents, then was passed down to his parents, Bill and Carol. When Ryan moved out at 22, his parents offered to let him rent the house at a family discount. But Ryan turned down the family rate. He wanted everything to be clear-cut. A formal lease was signed, market rate rent agreed upon, paid on time, always. Never late. Inside, the house reflected who he was. Tidy, minimal, no clutter. The bedroom was spotless. The living room had exactly 3 pieces of furniture. He lived like someone always ready to leave, even though no one was asking him to. If Ryan was the picture of order and stability, then Eric Park was the exact opposite. Eric was 29 and had been unemployed for nearly 2 years. Before that, he tried being a YouTuber, some reaction channels, a few travel vlogs, then a stint selling MLM products online. None of it lasted more than 6 months, but Eric never once seemed embarrassed. A year ago, Eric married Tessa, a young woman with over 200,000 followers on Instagram, where she posted travel shots, perfectly styled breakfast plates, and captions like, "Work hard, play harder." Right after the wedding, Eric and Tessa moved in with his parents, temporarily, as they put it. Carol called Ryan with the news, her voice bubbling with excitement. "They're only staying for a little while, honey. They're planning a new business. Eric says he's going to rebuild his channel. They're really passionate about it." Ryan didn't respond right away. He'd seen Eric's plans before, full of energy the first 3 weeks, completely abandoned by month 4. But he didn't argue. If their parents wanted to believe, he wouldn't stop them. 2 months later, Carol called again. This time her voice was lower, hesitant. "Ryan, I was wondering, do you think you could send a little extra each month to help us out? Just for now. Eric still hasn't started working, and you're doing okay, right? A little support wouldn't make much of a difference for you, would it?" Ryan sat still. He heard every word, wasn't surprised, but it still stung. "That's not my responsibility," he said, his voice calm and flat. There was silence on the other end. Then Carol let out a soft breath. "Okay, I understand. Don't worry about it, sweetheart. Just thought I'd ask." No argument, no harsh words. But Ryan knew the blurry line between being family and being used had just come into focus. He hung up and looked around the quiet living room. The soft yellow ceiling light glowed over the bookshelf against the wall, where he kept exactly 4 novels, 3 old photo frames, and a pendulum clock his grandfather had passed down. This was his home. He lived here, paid rent, fixed the leaky faucet himself, mowed the lawn himself. But now, his parents wanted him to pay more, not for this house, but for someone else living in their house, doing nothing. Ryan made himself a cup of tea and sat down in his chair. No expression, no words, but something cracked, deep in his mind. A month passed after that call from his mother, and everything seemed normal. Ryan kept working, paid his rent on time. No one brought up the extra support again. No pressure, but the silence didn't last. One Thursday afternoon, he got an email from a law office representing his parents, notifying him that his lease would be updated to reflect current market conditions. The rent was nearly doubled, starting next month. No explanation, no clear economic reason, no negotiation. Ryan read the email 3 times, the name on the signature line, Bill Park. He didn't react right away. Instead, he printed the new lease, got in his car, and drove to his parents' house that evening. No warning. Carol opened the door, surprised but smiling. "Ryan, I thought you'd been busy." He didn't respond, just asked, "Where's Dad?" Bill was watching the news in the living room. When Ryan walked in, he glanced up but didn't turn off the TV. "I got the new lease," Ryan said, voice calm. I want to know why the rent's nearly doubled." Bill didn't look at his son. He reached for his glass of water, took a sip, and replied like he was talking about the weather. "Life changes. Prices go up. Your brother needs help, and you can afford it." No hesitation. No sign he thought anything was wrong. Ryan looked at his father, his expression unreadable. "So I'm subsidizing Eric?" Bill still didn't meet his eyes. "He's starting over. It's just temporary." A long silence followed. No one said another word. Carol stood behind them, hands clasped, not stepping in. Ryan nodded, turned, and left the house. He drove back to his apartment. No radio, no clear thoughts, just something in his chest, colder than any winter he'd ever known. The next morning, Ryan put in a request for a day off. He needed time to think, but instead of thinking, he cleaned. In his own way. He wiped down every bookshelf, took down the old framed photos on the walls, packed them into a box, sealed it shut. No tears, no anger, just a clarity sharp as a thin blade. A week later, while running errands at a grocery store near his parents' neighborhood, Ryan spotted Eric and Tessa in the parking lot. A new SUV was parked crooked across two spaces. Tessa was posing next to the open trunk, packed with designer shopping bags. Eric grinned behind the phone, snapping pictures. Ryan watched from a distance. He didn't call out. No need. He stepped back, turned to leave, but right then, he heard Tessa's voice behind him. "Thank God. Ever since Eric suggested raising his brother's rent, things have been so much easier for us. He really knows how to plan ahead. You've got to invest in someone with vision, right?" Laughter burst out. Ryan didn't turn around. That night, he sat alone at his dinner table. The food on his plate slowly went cold. He opened a drawer, pulled out the old lease, folded it neatly, and set it next to the new one. 2 pieces of paper. 2 mindsets, 2 kinds of family. He didn't say a word to anyone. No calls, no emails. 3 days later, Ryan replied to the lawyer's email. He was rejecting the new lease. He'd pay the final month, then move out. No request for a refund, no questions asked. The night before the move, he stood in the living room where the family photos used to hang. The wall was bare now. The light cast a blurred shadow of him against it. No tears, no bitterness, just clarity. He finally understood his role in that family. A steady income, a financial solution, an older brother born to carry the weight. Ryan sealed the last box, quietly, as if he'd never lived there at all. Ryan Park moved out on a quiet Monday morning while the neighborhood was still asleep. He rented a small apartment on the 3rd floor of a modest complex in South Austin. No balcony, no yard, but it was clean, quiet, and most importantly, no one there knew him. He didn't bring any photo frames, no old books, no pendulum clock, no wool sweater his mother had once knitted. Those things were packed neatly into a cardboard box, sealed and left in the garage of the old house. He knew his mother would find it. Maybe she'd understand. Maybe she wouldn't. The new apartment had 1 bedroom, scratched wooden floors, and a heater that made a soft clicking noise every night. Ryan didn't complain. He arranged his things just the way he always did. Everything in its place, nothing messy, nothing extra. A desk by the window, a small bookshelf, a half-empty fridge. He didn't invite anyone over. There was nothing to show. Thanksgiving approached. Carol sent 3 texts, 2 missed calls. He didn't respond. Eric posted a photo of the family gathered around a turkey, captioned, "Grateful for those who show up." Ryan glanced at it, then deleted the app from his phone. The holiday passed. By Christmas, no one called anymore. In early January, his phone rang close to midnight. It was his mother. "Ryan, your father, the doctor says they need to run more tests. It looks like something's wrong with his heart." Her voice broke. He said nothing. "I'm not trying to pressure you, but you're so stubborn," his mother said. Ryan still didn't respond. A few seconds passed, then he hung up. No words. The next morning, he called Derek, his best friend from college, now a physician at St. Luke's Hospital. "Can you arrange a full checkup for my dad?" Ryan asked. "I'll send over his records, but don't mention my name. Just say it's through the insurance." Derek didn't ask questions. He just said, "All right, want me to update you with the results?" Ryan paused. "Only if it's something serious." "Okay, but you planning to keep doing this?" Ryan didn't answer right away. Then he said softly, "I don't hate them. I just don't want to keep humiliating myself." Derek let out a sigh on the other end of the line. "You're not humiliating yourself. You're just holding on to what little self-respect you've got left. And it's enough to live in peace." A A few days later, Ryan received an encrypted message from Derek. The test results were normal. A few elevated numbers. Just age catching up. Nothing serious. Ryan deleted the message. Didn't save it. Didn't mark the date. From then on, Ryan lived like someone without a family. No calls, no visits. He didn't show up for anything. Anniversaries, birthdays, cousins' weddings. All just fleeting subject lines in the family group email chain he had quietly blocked long ago. But on a rainy night in March, Ryan had a dream. His father was sitting alone on the porch, eyes shut tight, clutching his chest. No one was there. He woke up at 3:12 a.m., cold sweat on the back of his neck. He turned on the light, walked into the living room, and poured himself a glass of water. No calls. No texts. But that morning, he sent Derek another remote request. Monitor Bill's heart more closely. Run a full check every 6 months. No one in the family knew. Ryan didn't need them to know. He wasn't doing it to be seen. He just didn't want to someday stand over a casket and feel like he hadn't done enough. In the spring, when the trees outside his apartment balcony began to sprout green leaves, Ryan bought a small plant and placed it by the window. Not because he liked plants, but because part of him wanted to see if something alive could stay with him, without withering too soon. He didn't name the plant, didn't fuss over it, but every morning he pulled the curtain back so it caught the first light. A new routine, no weight, no memory attached. Through all the distance and silence, one thing never left him. Ryan still remembered the sound of his mother's breathing when she said, "You're so stubborn." But this time, he didn't feel the need to change because of it. Not because he didn't love her anymore, but because he had learned. Loving someone doesn't mean surrendering yourself. April came without warning. The plant by Ryan's window was still alive, even though he'd forgotten to water it for 3 days. Its leaves drooped a little, but they hadn't fallen. Maybe some things knew how to survive, even without care. Ryan kept working steadily, still walked home in the late afternoons, still hadn't unblocked the family group chat. Life had shrunk, neat, safe, untouched by anyone else, and he thought maybe, just maybe, it would stay that way for a few more years. But on a Friday morning, just as Ryan stepped out of the office to grab coffee, he saw a man waiting near the company lobby. Worn hoodie, hood pulled low, posture slumped like he hadn't slept in days. Their eyes met. Ryan froze. Eric Park. He looked thinner than the last time Ryan had seen him online. No oversized watch, no smug smile. His face was pale, patchy stubble on his jaw. He clutched a wrinkled canvas bag in one hand, its contents unclear. "Hey," Eric said, voice rough, "I need to talk." Ryan didn't nod, didn't shake his head. He just stood there. Eric stepped closer, gripping the bag tighter with both hands. "I know, it's been a while, but I need your help." Ryan looked at his brother, really looked for the first time in years. And what he saw wasn't the kid who used to break his toys, wasn't the teenager who borrowed money and never paid it back, wasn't the guy who suggested raising his rent. What stood in front of him was just someone worn down, exhausted. "What kind of help?" Ryan asked, his voice flat. Eric lowered his head, voice cracking. "Tess is gone. Took the kids. I've got nothing. Lost the house. I put everything into crypto. Lost it all. There's no one left to call." Ryan let out a quiet breath, then answered slowly, each word deliberate. "I used to be your brother. Now I'm just someone you used to know." No anger, no ice, just the truth, clear as daylight. Eric's hands trembled. "I messed up, I know, but if you don't help me, I've got no one." "You had someone," Ryan said, "and you chose to use them." Eric didn't argue. His eyes turned red. He opened his mouth, then closed it again. Silence spilled into the space between them, surrounded by a busy street where no one stopped. Ryan glanced at his watch. "I have to get back to work." He walked past Eric without looking back. But behind him he heard it, a choked sob. Not loud, not theatrical, just the sound of someone too drained to hold on to pride. Ryan paused for a second, not out of guilt, but because he never thought he'd see the day Eric actually cried. Still, he didn't turn around. Not for the sobs, not for blood, not for memory. He just walked straight into the building like no one had ever been standing there. That afternoon, Ryan sat alone on the patch of grass behind his apartment complex. No phone, no music, just stillness. "I don't feel relieved," he thought, "and I don't feel hate. I just feel empty, empty, like the room he'd cleared of every memory." Empty, like the space between two people who used to call each other brothers. Empty, like the silence after a confrontation where no one wins. He wondered, does this feeling even have a name? It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't anger. Maybe it was just what's left when everything has already burned, ash, and even the ash has drifted away. 3 weeks after the run-in with Eric, Ryan got a call from the family's law office. The voice on the line was slow, polite. His grandfather, Edward Park, had just passed away. The funeral was private, just a handful of family members. Ryan didn't show up, but he knew exactly what was happening. And just as he expected, Edward had left a will. The large house in the suburbs of San Antonio was now in the name of Ryan Park. It was a surprise, but not entirely out of the blue. Of the 3 grandchildren, Ryan was the only one who had ever lived with Edward briefly, when his parents were going through a rough patch. Ryan was the one who used to help fix his grandfather's old machines, cook lunch, read the newspaper with him at night. Not especially close, but clearly something had stuck. The law office invited Ryan to come in and finalize the paperwork. The house was worth a decent amount, quiet neighborhood, a garden, still filled with antique furniture. If he sold it, he'd walk away with a solid sum. If he kept it, it would be a family emblem, one of the few he had left. Ryan paused for a few seconds, then said, "I'm not accepting it." The person on the other end hesitated. "You're welcome to think it over if you'd like." "No need," Ryan cut in. "I'll send the paperwork. I want the house split equally among the grandkids. I don't need it in my name." A week later, he sent a handwritten letter to the lawyer. No flowery language, no explanation, just clear. Thumb. Some relatives whispered behind his back when they heard, "What's wrong with that guy who turns down that kind of money?" An old friend from college, now in real estate, called him up and asked outright, "Why didn't you keep it? This was your shot to get even with your family." "If I were you, I'd have sold the damn place and mailed them a Christmas card that said, 'Thanks for never believing I'd come out on top.'" Ryan chuckled, not at the joke, but at how familiar it all sounded. Then he said, "I don't live to get even. I live to stay clean." The friend went quiet for a moment. "Yeah, you do stay clean, just a little lonely, maybe." Ryan didn't argue. "This one's been around a long time," the old man said, peering at the dial through thick glasses. "Most folks toss them out, but you kept it." Ryan nodded slightly. "It was my grandfather's." "He's still around?" "He just passed." The old man gave a quiet nod. No more questions. He began opening the case, gently cleaning each gear, slow, precise, speaking as he worked, like he was thinking out loud. "When I was 10, the old man said, his hands steady on the tiny gears. "My birthday got canceled. My brother got sick. My mom forgot the day completely. I sat the whole afternoon next to an unbaked cake." Ryan looked up. He hadn't expected to hear a memory so close to his own. "Did you ever tell her?" he asked. "No, not in 50 years. The old man chuckled. Not bitter, not sad. Then he went on, still focused on the watch. "Forgiveness isn't about letting them rest easy. It's so we don't drown in the place they left us standing." Ryan sat in silence. After a long pause, he asked, "Then why didn't you throw the watch away?" The man set the watch down and looked at Ryan. His eyes shimmered behind thick lenses. "Because I don't need it to run. I just need to remember it once did. And that someone, once, gave me something." That afternoon, Ryan brought the watch home, unfixed. Still not ticking, but he placed it on his desk, right next to a faded photo frame. That evening, he sat by the window, watching the plant stretch quietly toward the light. No one was forcing it to live. No one cared for it regularly. But it lived, not to be seen, but because it chose not to wilt. One Saturday afternoon, Ryan found a pale yellow envelope in the mailbox outside his apartment. No return address, just a familiar handwriting on the front. Ryan Park. No postmark. Someone had walked it there and slipped it in by hand. He picked it up, paused a few seconds, then brought it inside. Sat down at the kitchen table. The late sunlight stretched long across the wood floor. He opened the envelope. No urgency, no suspicion. Just instinct. Inside was an old photo, slightly yellowed with time, and he recognized it instantly. In the photo, an 8-year-old boy, Ryan, was holding a smaller child in his lap. Eric, maybe 3 at the time. Ryan sat on a bench in the backyard of their old house, one arm wrapped around his brother, eyes looking straight into the camera. Behind them stood Bill, their father, staring at his two sons like the whole world was captured in that frame. Ryan didn't remember who took the picture, didn't recall what made that day special, but he remembered how it felt to be looked at like that. To be seen. As if, in that one moment, he was the center, not the backup plan, not the shadow trailing behind a younger brother who always needed more. He turned the photo over, blank. No writing, no apology, no message. But that silence, for Ryan, was enough. He slid the photo into his wallet, not in some hidden flap, not wrapped or tucked away, just right beside his driver's license, something he carried every day like a part of who he was. He didn't call, didn't text, didn't write back, didn't ask his mother why she sent it, didn't ask why there were no words. He didn't need answers, just a sign. That weekend, Ryan woke up earlier than usual. Clear skies, light breeze. He walked to a park a few blocks away, the one with wooden benches facing a small lake. He had never stayed long there before. But today, he let himself stop. Around him were families, a father teaching his daughter to ride a bike, an elderly couple tossing bread to ducks, a group of friends laughing loud by the basketball court. Ryan watched it all like someone outside a window, just passing through. He thought about the word family, not the legal kind, not the people who share your blood, but the place where you're allowed to just be, without comparison, without expectation, without having to sacrifice yourself to belong. Ryan didn't hate his parents. He'd never hated Eric. He was just tired of carrying a role no one knew was heavy. And when he finally stopped playing it, no one asked why. They just blamed him for walking off stage. The photo in his wallet didn't change any of that. But it wasn't fake either. It didn't excuse. It didn't explain. It was just a fragment of memory, sent without words, without pressure. A quiet whisper from the past. We had something once. Ryan stayed still as the sun rose higher, lighting up the surface of the lake. A soft breeze stirred the trees along the path. One leaf drifted down and landed gently on the bench beside him. He didn't know if he'd ever go back. Maybe never. Maybe someday, when no one's waiting anymore. But one thing he knew for certain: forgiving doesn't mean returning. Forgiveness for him wasn't about forgetting. It wasn't revenge withheld. It wasn't dragging old wounds into new places. Forgiveness was keeping his hands clean. It was giving himself permission to move forward without needing to turn back and prove anything. He stood up and walked slowly along the path around the lake. Trees lined both sides, full and green. Children's laughter echoed in the distance. Ryan didn't smile, but his eyes were softer than usual. Not everyone who walks away from family is cold. Sometimes, leaving is the only way to protect what's still intact inside. Ryan didn't leave out of hate. He left because he refused to twist himself into someone he wasn't, just to fit into a picture that no longer had space for him. We don't get to choose where we're born, but we can choose how we live. Quietly, cleanly, without resentment, and without continuing to endure what no longer deserves our endurance. What do you think? Is there a limit to family loyalty? And if your family ends up hurting you more than healing you, would you stay or would you walk away? Share your thoughts in the comments. If this story meant something to you, hit like, subscribe to Family Drama, and turn on the bell so you don't miss more raw, honest stories about the ties that shape and sometimes strain our lives.